Hello all and welcome to video classes by Konnur Institutes. Today in this session we will be talking more on the loss of information and also the unequal distribution of class intervals, right? So what is this loss of information means? If you have your textbook in front of you, then you can just look into your textbook and you can see there is an example which they have given. There is a table in which class intervals you can find from 0 till the 100, okay? 0 to 10, 10 to 20, so this goes on till 90 to 100. So that's the table wherein we will be understanding the scores scored by the students in the mathematics subject, right? So if you look into that class interval, you can see there the class interval, the gap between the upper limit and the lower limit, if you check that, it is 10 for each class interval, okay? So take a moment and then you can check. Now, when we have collated all the data and under this table, you can see there is a frequency, there is also an observation, there is also a tally mark, and then you can also see there is a class mark also. Class mark is nothing but the midpoint. So now how this loss of information can happen? Let's understand this. So class interval, then the observations, okay? Then we have frequency, then we have a tally marking, and then the midpoint, okay? So 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, this goes on till 90 to 100. Now, if we consider the previous example which we have discussed in the last video class, the observation in this class interval we have seen 1, 5, 8 and 7. So that's the reason we have got 4 as the frequency, okay? Now, how did we mark the tally marking for this class interval? For 1 we have marked 1 like this, for 5 another line, for 8 another line, for 7 there was another line, right? And for the next class interval, 10 was the number, 12, then we have 17, right? So this becomes 3, and here we have 3 lines which give us the 3. This tally mark is nothing but these 3 numbers, okay? We are talking about these 3 different numbers, but we are not talking about these 3 and 3 here, okay? That's the differentiation between the observation and the frequency. Frequency is nothing but what we are talking is number of observation, how many times they have repeated in the same class intervals. So you can see now. So this goes like same for the other class interval. So next we had 22. So this becomes 1 frequency and here there will be only 1 tally marking. Now if you consider what number will be the midpoint here? This will be 5 for first class interval. How did we find that midpoint? 5 upper class limit of this class interval plus the lower class limit divided by 2, which becomes 10 by 2, we got 5, right? So this is the class mark or the midpoint. So the same applies for all the other class intervals. So this becomes like this. Sorry, this is 15, this is 25 and 35. So this goes on, right? Now we are talking about this loss of information, right? If you understand this table first, then we can move to the loss of information. So what is this loss of information? See, we have observations as these. Students have scored 1 mark in mathematics. This is the 5 marks which the other student has scored in mathematics. So like these are the 100 students or 50 students if you have considered 50. These are the number of 50 students in which they have scored in a mathematics subject. So these are the number of students scored by them in the particular subject. So 8 is a marks scored by a student. Similarly, 22 is also a marks scored by another student. Now, when we have collected this data, frequency you can see here 4, 3, 1 are not the marks scored by the student, but they are what the frequency is stating here is nothing but how many students have been scored in this range, in this class interval and also in this class interval, right? But do we know that? Can you guess that these 3 students have scored 10, 12 and 17? Can you guess if you do not have this observation? You cannot guess, right? Maybe it may be 19 if all the 3 students have scored the same marks. There even that possibility can happen, right? So this is the loss of information what we are talking about. The observation or the exact marks which is being scored by the student is not being appeared here. But what we are showing here is nothing but how many students have scored marks in this range. So there may be a loss of information if we calculate this information in this pattern. So that's how the loss of information can happen when you are collating the data. So next we will be talking more on frequency distribution with unequal class. So what is this unequal distribution of a class? You can see here, okay, the class interval we have 10 here, we have 10, 10. So this 10 is same for the other class interval also. But if this frequency number, if we don't have 4, 3 and 1, but instead if we have 21, 23 and 6, let's say. So 6 is quite easy and also there is a very small data which is being collated in this range. But if you see this class interval, the second class interval and the first class interval, you can see that 23 students have scored marks in this range, okay? 21 students have scored marks in this range, right? But we don't know how many have scored more than 5, how many of them have scored less than 5. So, to understand us very deeply and for somebody who is looking into your data, if he wants to understand how many students have scored less than 5 or more than 5, it becomes very easy for them. If this class interval, if we don't have 10 as a class mark, 10 as a class interval. So what we will do is, instead of that, we will divide the class interval into 2. Not like this. 0 to 5. So from 0 to 10, we divided this class interval into 2. Now, from 10 to 20, we have divided this as 10 to 15, 15 to 20. So, this gives us a more accurate information, right? Now, this information can be like this, right? So, out of 21, let's say 11 students have scored in this range and 10 students have scored in this range. And out of 13, you can say 11 students have scored in this range and then 12 students have scored in this range. Now you can see that 21 and 23 have been divided. So now we can get accurate information. In this range, we have 11 students or 11 number of observations which have been occurred. Right? So this also can happen if we have a very large data, and we can also have unequal class interval if we have so much of data accumulated in one class interval. So when you have done like this, then the class mark also changes. Class mark is nothing but the midpoint. So if you consider For 0 to 10, the class mark was 5 before, right? But now this becomes 2.5, right? For 5 to 10, this becomes 7.5. So same applies for everything. Next we have 12.5, 17.5. And if you keep the third class interval as it is, which is 20 to 30, and the next class interval 30 to 40, you can see here we have 5 here, the gap, okay, but here we have 10. This is what we call it as the unequal distribution of the class interval. So for this class interval, what will be the mid mark or the midpoint? It will be 25. How did we calculate 25? Is nothing but 30, which is the upper class limit, plus 20, the lower class limit, divided by 2, becomes 50 divided by 2, we got 25. So this is the 25 which I have written here. So next class mark will be 35, because here we have 40 and 30 as our class limits. So the class mark or the midpoint also changes if you have unequal distribution of class interval. So this is how we will have unequal distribution of class intervals too. And if you observe here, the class interval which we have had before, wherein the class mark was 10, and now you can see that the class mark here are not equal. Now first we have 5, next we have 10, right? So later we can even have 10, and also we even also can have 5 is also there. So if you mark this frequency on a graph, there you can see the variation in the graph. So this will be your homework, and I suggest you to do, and you will be able to understand how there will be a change in the frequency. So if we have accumulated data, both data 21 here and 23 here, this, if you mark 21 and 23 in the graph, this frequency gives you another graph, and if you mark 10, 11 and 12, this gives the another graph. So if you compare those two graphs, you can easily understand how many students have scored what number of marks in which range, right? So that is also one differentiation when we make an unequal distribution, for us to easily understand when there are more number of students accumulated in one group. So that's it for today's class. In the next class, we will be talking more on the frequency array. See you all in the next video class.